I made top 8 at Elite Cup this weekend, and today we gotta talk about how. Hey, Nick from 9 Card TCG, and today we're gonna be talking about the deck I played to Elite Challenge. No surprise, it's Single Strike Lugia. It's in the video thumbnail, probably. I'm recording this before it's made, so I don't really know. But, I mean, I always play Single Strike Lugia, so we played that. We got top 8, and what I want to do is talk about the decks that the deck that I used, the actual card counts and everything, what I played against, how the matches went, how I beat them, my thought process, and what the rest of the tournament was like. So let's get straight to it. But before we do, most people are not subscribed to the channel, and I am trying to hit 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If we do, we're going to have a really cool giveaway. So if you haven't already, do me a favor, like, subscribe, comment, all kind of stuff. Tells YouTube this is a good channel. Other people should watch it, and it just helps me achieve that goal, and it would mean a lot to me. So all that said, let's go ahead and get straight to the deck profile. This is basically the deck I've been playing for when the Knoxville happened. Whenever Knoxville happened, I was playing Single Strike Urshifu Lugia. It was a little bit different of a list back then because it was pre-rotation, but now it's modified. Single Strike Lugia has been around since rotation in April, so we've been playing this for, 5 months or whatever it is. So the deck works like this. You use Lugia V-Star's Summoning Star ability to take 2 colorless non-rule box Pokemon from your discard and put them into play. The 2 Pokemon you're going to choose are 2 Archeops. That's your main goal, is to use Summoning Star to get 2 Archeops in the discard. Because Archeops has the ability Primal Turbo, that once during your turn you can search your deck for up to 2 special energies and attach them to one of your Pokemon. So Archeops is a stage 2, and it comes from a fossil as its basic, and it's just a huge pain to get into play. So we use Lugia to cheat Archeops into play. Once we get the Archeops in play, we can use Archeops to power up our Pokemon incredibly fast. We can get 4 special energies onto a single Pokemon in a single turn, and that doesn't include attach for turn, so we can get 5 energies, which is massive. Especially when we're playing something like the Single Strike engine or the Single Strike box, that the idea is your Pokemon need a lot of energy, but they hit really hard. And so we have Tyranitar V, very, very important card for the deck. It's really useful into a lot of matchups like the Giratina matchups, to the Gardevoir matchups, to the Mew matchups. Why? Because of the first attack, Crag Lance is actually really good into Lost Zone and things like Gardevoir. First, Dark double colorless, 60 damage, and your opponent has to discard the top 2 cards of their deck. Now, that 60 damage against something that's weak to Dark is actually going to be 120, which a lot of things in Gardevoir is weak to Dark. So we can do quite a bit of damage to that. And then we have Single Strike Crush, 240 damage for 2 Darks and 2 Colors, but we have to discard the top 4 cards of our deck. We, as a Dark type, are not weak to fighting. We're actually weak to grass, and there's really no grass in the format, which is really, really cool. There's a little bit creeping up because of Charizard, so there's a little bit of overlap there, which kind of stinks, but not the end of the world. We also use the Single Strike Urshifu V. Impact Blow does 180 damage for 2 fighting and a colorless. You can't use Impact Blow on your next turn, but really, when we use Urshifu, we're using the Single Strike Urshifu V Max. For the G Max 1 blow attack, 3 fighting and a colorless does 270 damage, but you are ignoring all effects and abilities on your opponent's active Pokemon, so it's a massive shred. Now, 270 damage, 240 damage, that might not sound like a lot, but we can increase the amount of damage we're doing thanks to Single Strike Energy. Single Strike Energy, when it's attached, it can only be attached to a Single Strike Pokemon, but it provides either a Dark or a Fighting type energy, so it can be attached to the Tyranitar to fulfill the Dark type energy, or it can be attached to the Urshifu for the Fighting type energy requirement. And for each Single Strike Energy attached, our Pokemon's attacks do 20 more damage to the active Pokemon. So that 240 with 2 Single Strike Energies now becomes 280. Hey, there's a lot of Pokemon running around that have 280 health. Lugia V-Star, Arceus V-Star, Giratina V-Star, Palkia V-Star. That's pretty popular. Plus, it also deals with a lot of Stage 1 EXs. Not that there's really any of those, but something to consider. 240 is also enough to knock out most Pokemon V or most basic Pokemon EXs. The Urshifu, now we can hit 290, 310, 330. We can go as high as 350 to one-shot opposing Urshifu VMAX, more likely the Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX, Duraludon VMAX. We also ignore the Skyscraper ability, which would prevent damage when we have special energies attached, but we just totally ignore that and knock it out anyway. So things like the upcoming Blastoise EX that has 330 health and would also take 30 less damage from attacks, we ignore that. So we can just take these big KOs that we normally otherwise wouldn't be able to, and that's where Urshifu really comes in. We also have the single strike Yveltal. It does a decent amount of damage. It's really just a good attacker into things like Lost Zone. It has 3 dark energies as its attack requirement, so you're going to be stacking a bunch of single strike energies on there. It's really cool because with 3 single strike energies, now that 110 is hitting for 170 into something that's weak to dark is 340, which means we can take big up trades into Mew V Max or Gardevoir EX or something like that with a single prize. Yveltal, we're also hitting into Cramorant, gets hit for 110, it gets KO'd. We don't get counted back by Cramorant because we have 130 health. Sableye can't knock us out in a single hit with Lost Mine because, again, that puts 12 damage counters. We have 130, so, you know, it's not bad. It's a cool card for some of those important matchups. Lugia is also a really good attacker. Tempest Dive does 220, and we get discard a Stadium and play, plus it does 280 health. It's a good attacker, so we have a wide variety of really good attackers, good support Pokemon in the form of Archeops. We got double Lumineon, we can play from our hand to our bench, and we start to deck for any supporter card we want. I use this a lot this weekend, and Pumpkaboo, which is very important. You don't use it as much, but with all the Giratinas, they play Path, whether it's Lost Zone or Arceus. Not Champao. Actually, I've seen Champao play Path. I've seen a Lugia deck with Path. Like, there's a lot of stuff that just runs around and plays a random Path or two. Miraidon starts to play Path. We need to be able to get rid of things like Path and Temple of Sinnoh, and that's where Pumpkaboo really comes in, because we might have to either, you know, get Path out of the way so we can use Summoning Star to get our Archeops in play, or maybe we need to use Lumineon to find a Professor's Research, a Boss's Order, something, and Pumpkaboo helps us do that. How do we go ahead and find things like Pumpkaboo? We have 4 Ultra Balls, we have 2 Nest Balls, and 4 Capturing Aromas. That's our Pokemon Search. We also have 3 copies of Urn of Vitality, which lets us take 2 Single Strike energies from our discard and put them back into our deck. This is what makes the Single Strike Lugia version so good. Lugia normally doesn't have any way to recover any type of energies, but with Urn of Vitality, we do. So we can go ahead and use something like G-Max 1 Blow, put a bunch of Single Strike energies into the discard. We have 330 health, so it's going to be a little hard for a lot of stuff to one-shot us back. And then we can go ahead and play Urn of Vitality to get those energies back into the deck, accelerate them immediately with Archeops, and now use Impact, something like Beatdown, or we can use G-Max 1 Blow again, back to back in what would otherwise be something very difficult to do. Or one of our Yveltal gets knocked out with the Single Strike energies attached, we can recover them and attach them to a Tyranitar or an Urshifu or something like that. So the recovery aspect of this is very important. Now, how do we actually get those Archeops in the discard? We talked about it's really important to do so, but how do we make it happen? Well, Ultra Ball is a great way of doing it. You discard 2 cards from your hand, and you search your deck for any Pokemon you want. So if you're able to discard Archeops with Ultra Ball, you're in business. But we don't always have that. Well, we can capture an Aroma to find Archeops, flip a coin. If heads, you get an evolution Pokemon, like Archeops, like the Lugia V-Star, or we can, if we flip a coin and it's tails, we get a basic Pokemon. Usually, turn 1 or turn 2 going, or turn 1 going second, I should say. If we flip a coin with capturing Aroma and it's tails, we're going to get a Lumineon. So we can go ahead and play Lumineon for the Professor Burnett. Professor Burnett lets us search the deck for any 2 cards we want and put them directly into our discard pile. Which, this is a card that came out with the Pokemon V Union boxes, and now we get the full art in Silver Tempest. That's what it was used for, was for Pokemon V Unions. But now, because of Archeops needs to be in the discard for Summoning Star, it makes perfect sense that we get it in Silver Tempest, where the Lugia and the Archeops were also released. Roxanne was the worst card in this deck. I used it 0 times. Iono, it's good. It's just a lot of the things right now can kind of get out of Roxanne, and not being able to play Roxanne until your opponent has taken 3 or more prizes kind of stinks. Iono is a great supporter. Shuffle your hand, put it to the bottom of your deck, draw cards equal to the number of prizes you have remaining. That both you and your opponent do that, by the way. So at the beginning of the game, if you have 6 prizes remaining and you need a new hand, all those cards you shuffle go to the bottom of the deck, and that's important because now you're not going to see those cards when you draw your 6, right? When you draw cards for the Iono. So let's say my hand is a bunch of energies. I don't want to play Professor's Research where I have to discard all those energies and then I can draw 7. I'd rather play Iono so that I can shuffle them, put them to the bottom of the deck. And now not only do I save those energies for later, but I don't draw them with Iono. And if I was playing something like Roxanne or Judge, where you shuffle your hand into your deck and you draw cards, there's a chance you could draw the thing you don't want. With Iono, it's impossible to do so, at least that particular card, right? If you have multiple copies, whatever, but you get the idea. Then we have Boss's Orders. Bring one of your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active, 3 copies of those. A Collapsed Stadium. It's useful for certain matchups and also to deny prizes. Mesagosa just helps us find Pokemon. And then we have a wide assortment of energies. And if you notice, they're all special energies. V-Guard energy, we take 30 less damage from our opponent's Pokemon V. This actually did really help me in one of the matchups, and we'll talk about it. Gift energy, when the Pokemon this card is knocked out, you draw until you have 7 cards in your hand. Jet energy, when you attach this card from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon, you move that bench Pokemon to the active spot. 3 double turbo energies, you get 2 colorless energies. Your attacks do 20 less damage, but for most of our Pokemon like Tyranitar, Urshifu, whatever, we already talked about the single strike energy that allows us to increase the damage, so not really a big deal there. And then we have Impact energy, provides all energies, but only one at a time. However, we also can't be poisoned, and if you are poisoned, you recover. So things like the Gomora deck that you don't really see, but in case you do, you can't be poisoned by Gomora, which is kind of cool, yeah, I guess. And that's the whole deck. So now we're just going to go ahead and talk about what I played and how we beat them. So some of these decks are going to be very familiar to the ones we just talked about in the best decks in September video. We're not going to talk about how the decks function, especially this one, because my round 1 opponent was playing Single Strike Lugia. Now, I don't know if they also had the Urshifu. They might have been playing a list similar to this with the Stonejourner instead of Urshifu. But basically, my opponent went first, and they had, very unfortunately, were only able to get a single Archeops into play. One of the things that makes Lugia a little bit challenging is knowing when you have to just Summoning Star and get one Archeops, or do you wait a turn and try to get both? There's pros and cons to both arguments or both answers depending on the situation. Obviously, you always want to try to get 2. My opponent only got 1. So they got 1, they knocked out my active, so they got 2 early prizes. But after they got those 2 prizes, I just bossed up their 1 Archeops and knocked it out. Now they have no way of accelerating energy, so they're stuck manually attaching to the bench. So now it's Lugia versus Lugia in the active. I have a Lumineon, and they boss up the Lumineon and KO it. But now they have they go down to 2 prizes. Sure, I have 5, but they have no way of dealing with this other Lugia. And I have 2 Archeops in play. I can easily get a Tyranitar and just power that up, and now they're in a lot of trouble. So they're not able to one-shot a Tyranitar. There's 230 health, but Tyranitar can one-shot them. And because they're stuck manually attaching, they're never going to power it up fast enough. So eventually I just knocked out their Lugia V-Star, and they were just stuck. They had the Lumineon in the active just to try to buy a turn, but it didn't really matter. So they scooped. Round 1 went to me. That's just how Lugia goes sometimes. I've been on the other end of it where I was only able to get 1 Archeops. In fact, NAIC, in the 4 games I played, I was only able to get both Archeops once, if even. So yeah, it was not a lot of fun. It really stinks when that happens, but it's one of the challenges of Lugia, I guess. So on to round 2, 1-0. Now we have Gardevoir, and this was probably one of the closest matches I had all day. My opponent played really well. They had a little bit of a slow start, which I think really helped me, but their single prize deck predominantly, they made, I think, 2, I made a mistake, and they made, I think, 2 mistakes, and their 2 mistakes was more severe than my 1. I also got bailed out, but we'll talk about that. So they went on their, I think I went first maybe. So their first turn, they benched the Zacian V and went Roar the Sword. Luckily for them, they attached the energy to something other than the Zacian, because I just next turn boss KO'd it immediately for an early 2 prizes. So that was a big deal, because that means they don't have that Zacian for a while, because they can't just afford to give up another 2 prize attacker. And so they're forced to use these single prizes. So they can't take a big surprise KO with the Zacian nowadays. So they got a little greedy with the Zacian early, thought maybe I couldn't make it happen, but I did. And the other mistake they made was they played Luminion to search for Iono. They Iono'd me down to 1, and then they played they attached a Forest Seal Stone, then played Iono, I should say, and then used the Forest Seal Stone to search for Collapse Stadium so they can get the Luminion out of play. But at that point, I only had 1 prize remaining. So I have 1 prize. You have like Curlias and Ralts on the bench. So they go ahead and they use their Forest Seal Stone to search for a Collapse to deny the Luminion. It doesn't really matter at that point. Like if I have boss for game, whether I knock out your Luminion or I knock out your single prize 90 HP or 80 HP Curly or whatever, it doesn't really make a difference. So I think that was a huge missed opportunity by my opponent. They could have gotten anything else. They did a really smart play where they had, attacked, they knocked out something with their Shining Arcana Gardevoir, and then they were able to retreat it and come into the Gardevoir EX that I could not one-shot, because I could have just used Archeops to take a KO onto the Shining Arcana Gardevoir. It would have been fine. But they Iono'd me down to 1, and the 1 card that I had was Urshifu VMAX. And then I top-decked a Luminion. And I played the Luminion, and I got my boss, and I brought up a Curlia, and I just KO'd it with the Archeops. So I kind of got bailed out. That's the content creator plot armor coming through big time right there. There's a world where I really don't win that. The mistake I made was that I should have put a gift energy on the active. Well, I needed to put a gift energy onto something, because I needed to draw cards after they Iono'd me. So I needed to I didn't want to put it on my Archeops, because then it just bench up the other Archeops. I needed to put it on the Pokemon that was a threat, which I think was like, I had to take a single strike Yveltal or something like that. So I should have put it on that, because that forced to KO the Yveltal, and I could have drawn out of the Iono a little bit easier. I got very lucky anyway, but drawing 6 cards would have been a huge thing, and it wouldn't have been so much luck. But you never really want to leave your win condition to your opponent not having it. That's not a great... And unfortunately, like I said, they just kind of got stuck a little bit there. That was the best win condition after the plays they had made. Again, the better play would have been something... maybe they have a one-off path. They don't usually run it, but anything would have been better than that Collapse Stadium. So I think all things considering, it was a very, very tough match. So I'm going into round 3, 2-0, and I didn't say this before, but I had gotten to the tournament late, which means I took a late penalty. Now, the tournament hadn't started, so I didn't get a round 1 loss, but I did get penalized for being late. And when you get a late penalty, what happens is you are put to the bottom of each bracket. So when you start the tournament at 000 or 000, whatever, I was in last place by default. Then I'm 1-0. Of all the 1-0s, I'm the last person, the last ranked 1-0. Even if my resistance was hot, well, everyone's resistance, whatever. But like round 2, round 3, when I'm 2-0, 3-0, and I start to build resistance, it doesn't matter if my resistance is higher than someone else's. Because of my late penalty, I'm automatically put to the bottom. That, I think, was a little bit important for round 3, because my round 3 opponent was 1-1, and I'm 2-0. So they got up paired into me, and they were playing Lost Zone Tina, which is actually a favored matchup, according to Trainer Hill data anyway, for Lugia. Now, of course, Lugia can very easily lose to anything, depending on how it sets up, right? That's the easiest way. If you don't, that turn 1 or 2 can be really, really tumultuous. And the same thing with Arceus decks. If that turn 1 or 2 can go really poorly, and if it does, you're probably going to lose. But if it goes well, you have a really good chance of winning. Especially with the Lugia, you have a very strong chance of beating anything. And I was on fire. All 3 rounds, I was getting turn 2 Arceus both into the discard. I was getting Lugia V-Star. I was summoning Star. It was. I've never experienced anything like this. Like so much consistency out of this deck. I don't know if it's the way I built it. I don't know if I was just on a hot streak. It was just my day. Whatever it was, I was happy about it. My opponent, though, for round 3 was not so lucky. They had an extremely slow start, and I'm just KOing with Cragalanche. And just not only am I knocking out their Comfies, they're the thing they need to make the deck function, but I'm also discarding cards off the top of the deck. So I ended up discarding one of the Giratina V-Stars and the Colress with Cragalanche. I discarded something else, like a boss or whatever. So like some pretty important cards got discarded off of that Cragalanche. And then on top of me discarding things that they probably didn't want or weren't expecting, they also have to lost zone 10 cards. So they're losing 1/6 of their deck, plus extra cards being discarded than the ones they're already utilizing to just play the game. And it just took them forever to get going. By the time they got going, they weren't able to one-shot my Lugia V-Star because of the V-Guard energy, which, oh my god, was the MVP of this match, for sure. They got to a point where they had 2 Giratina V-Stars mostly powered up. One had 3 energies and one had 2. So they can't Lost Impact the active. And they could, but it wouldn't KO it. I'd be left with 30 health left. And then they have to get rid of 2 energies. Now I come in and attack, and they have to use their V-Star power or have a boss's orders that I probably got rid of at that point. So you're kind of like out of boss. You had a Colress maybe. You just kind of got stuck into a little bit of a tight spot there. So instead of using Lost Impact, they just KO'd my Lugia to take their first 2 prizes. Meanwhile, I'm already down to, I think, 3 prizes at this point. So now I bring in my Tyranitar. Tyranitar just goes ahead and one-shots the Giratina. So now I'm like, oh, beautiful. Now they bring up this other Tyranitar. They can KO me, but they're going to lose all those energies. Right? Because I just KO'd 1. They have another one that has just 2 energies attached. So that means if they attach an energy to attack, they have to get rid of 2, and they're already down all 4 Mirage Gates. Like it took so long for anything to happen because I kept knocking out their Comfies. It was really difficult for them to build any real momentum, and the V-Guard energies just made it that much more difficult because the Lugia has 280 health. It was, for me, very good, but you hate to win because your opponent doesn't play the game. Like when I win, I want to win because I beat my opponent, not because my opponent's deck failed. But we're going into round 4, 3-0. I'll take it however I can get it. Round number 4, and there's only 6 rounds, so that means everyone's telling me if I win round 4, just ID the next 2, and you automatically get put into top cut. So top cut of 8, there was 60 people in this tournament. So it's like, all right, I just win this next one. And I go against a deck that I feel pretty confident against, which is Arctina. Arctina can be problematic if they have a path to the peak right away and it sticks, right? Because they path, judge, all that kind of stuff. And my opponent did have a really nice play. They had no cards. They had 1 card in hand. They used Squovit to put that card to the bottom of the deck. And then they top deck a Judge. It's like, oh, come on, man. Then they're like, oh, they just slammed the Judge. I'm like, yeah, Judge. Which was really annoying. But I happened to get everything I needed off of the Judge. Just everything was coming. Everything was coming up Millhouse. You know what I mean? It was my day. I was making top cut. And sometimes when things are just lined up perfectly for you, nobody's stopping you. And they played Path of the Peak. They only were able to find 1, but even so, I run Pumpkaboo. I had stadium options. I was able to bump the stadium pretty easily with Messagosa. We're finding Pokemon off of the Messagosa, both me and my opponent, which was a little unfortunate, but one thing that I found interesting that they they didn't, they claimed, I don't know how, if it's true or not, I don't really see why they would lie, but they claimed they didn't know how to play against Lugia. And if you've been playing for any amount of time, you've probably encountered a Lugia once or twice. Again, maybe they're new to Arctina and don't really know the matchup or the lines against Lugia. Maybe they're new and they just haven't played against Lugia. Maybe where they play, there just isn't anyone that plays Lugia. I don't really know, right? It's just, it struck me as a little odd that you would be playing in a cup and you're at the top, we're sitting at table 1 and you haven't played against the Lugia deck. You didn't really know what the deck wants to do and how to play against it. So I thought that was a little strange, and it's not a criticism of my opponent. They were very nice. I enjoyed playing against them. It was just an interesting thing that they had mentioned, and it made me a little bit more honestly. It made me more confident in my decisions, because I'm like, okay, well, if they don't know how to play against this, then everything I do might throw them off. Or everything I do might be like, oh man, that's really annoying kind of thing. Like just being able to really knock out their Pokemon pretty easily. Now, this particular Arctina did run the Leafeon. They ran the Leafeon V so they can guarantee greening cells. It's kind of annoying, right? Because we talked about Tyranitar being weak to grass. So that can one-shot my Tyranitar pretty effectively. But they have to flip heads, right? Leaf Blade does 90 damage, and flip heads it does however much more. But even if it's 30 more damage, that's 120. And then onto a Tyranitar, it's 240, right? So Tyranitar has 230 health, so that can KO 50% of the time, one-shot my Tyranitar, which is very problematic. However, I had the foresight to get my Urshifu V into play, so I can power it up to Urshifu V Max, bring it into the active, and then use Beatdown to KO their Arceus V. Now, when they use the Leafeon to attack, they're not knocking this thing out. And because Leafeon only has 200 HP, I was able to retreat the Urshifu, discarding the Single Strike energies, playing Urn of Vitality to put them back in, because I know I'll need them to knock out the Giratina. Then I bring up the Lugia, attack with the Lugia to knock out the Leafeon, and now I'm down to just 2 prizes. Now all I have to do is either attack with Tyranitar or knock out that the Giratina with Gmax 1 blow. So it's looking kind of good for me, and my opponent still has not taken any prizes yet. So 2 prizes to 6, and they have a single powered up Pokemon in play. It's looking really good in my favor. So anyway, I come out, I start blasting. No, it was really just they had a hope that off of a judge that I didn't, or Iono or whatever it was, that I didn't draw. I couldn't get energies onto the Tyranitar to KO it, but I could, and I did, and it wasn't that big of a deal. So it was a pretty easy match. The thing that I was surprised at, they had the opportunity to use the Mesagosa, they flipped heads, and they didn't get an Arceus V-Star, which would have they could have used Starbirth to find Path to the Peak. Now, I don't think it really would have mattered that much that way, because I'd already used Summoning Star, but they could have tried something instead. I think they got the Leafeon to greening cells onto the Leafeon V. Then it's fine if you want greening cells onto the Leafeon, because Lost Impact takes 2 energies from anywhere on the board, so that's okay, I guess. But you could have at least put it onto the Giratina to like attack faster with it instead of attacking with the Leafeon. It just seemed like if you really wanted the Leafeon, you Mesagosa heads, get the Arceus V-Star, then you Starbirth for the Leafeon and something else, and then you can Trinity Nova, hit for 200 instead of Trinity charging with the Arceus V, right? It just there definitely was a misplay in there. Maybe there was a reason why. Maybe, who knows? Maybe all their Arceus V-Stars were prized. I don't know. Maybe they had a plan in play, and then I threw them off with the Urshifu V-Max. I don't really know. What I didn't ask them. Right? That's kind of rude. But something to consider. Arceus V-Star is really, really good and a lot better than Arceus V. So yeah. So we're going into round 5, and there's 4 of us sitting at 4-0. So we all agreed that if we match with each other, we'll take the ID. So we take the ID round 5, round 6. I match up with one of those individuals. We already agreed we'll take the IDs. So we do. And now I finished Swiss 4-0-2 and feeling really confident that I locked up top 8. But, oh boy, this is where it gets messy. Of course, my tournament run would be ended by Mew. And again, this is not to discredit or discount how well my opponent played. They played very well and they were very nice. It's just I started with a lone Lugia, and I had a bench Lumineon V, so I was like, all right, if they escape rope, at least they get the new Lumineon V KO'd. But they didn't. They got the switch card, and they just drew. I mean, they opened battle VIP, like double battle VIP pass. They flip. I think they flipped Cram Heads. Maybe they flipped Cram's Tails. It didn't really matter because they Genesect, found the Forest Seal Stone. They found the Elisa Sparkle, and then they can get the they attached from hand the what's it called, the thing, the Fusion Strike Energy. They had a Genesect and V in play, so they just go Forest Seal Stone for the switch, boom, and now they're able to KO the Lugia with the Meloetta because they have Power Tablet as well. Everything you could have won just immediately scoops and went to game 2 because like, what are you supposed to do about that? So game 2 goes, I'm like, okay, I start an Urshifu V. Not great, but I can go ahead and bench the Lugia V kind of safely. I got my Archeops in the discard, and now they do the same exact thing, except this time they get the escape rope, and they just one-shot the Lugia V, and that's it. There's nothing. I mean, I try to play it out because it's best of 3, and if you lose, you're done. So you might as well just try to play it out. But there was I knew right then and there, there's nothing I could do. I'm behind. I don't have a Lugia V-Star, and if I bench one, they just easily go boss KO. So it was really bad. And like I said, of course my tournament run ends with Mew, because why wouldn't it? This deck, I hate it so much, but that's what it is. So I finished 8th. Now, this is where Content Creator Plot Armor fails me. I technically finished 6th. Based on my record and resistance, but because of the late penalty, I got pushed down to 8th, which means my pairing was now changed. So who knows if I got paired up against whoever I would have, or I guess whoever was in 3rd, because I was technically 6th. Who knows? It might have went very differently. Might not have. I don't really know. But lateness penalty did ultimately get me. But you know what? Getting in the top 8, I'll take losing in top 8 over losing in round 3 to something random, right? So it ended up working in my favor anyway. So there you have it. There's my League Cup run from this past weekend. I hope you enjoyed. Maybe found some of this informative. If you're thinking about playing Single Strike Lugia, or you played one of the decks that I beat, now you kind of know what I'm thinking and how it works and all that kind of stuff. So I hope you maybe found this a little informative. If you did, again, please like, subscribe, comment, all kind of stuff. Tells YouTube this is a good channel. Other people should watch it. That's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. I want to give a special shout out to the YouTube members: Black Wins, Mike the Highest, Fernando Ortiz, Chin Pokemon, and Eric N. Thank you all so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. And if you want to become a channel member, you can go ahead and click the channel member button somewhere at the bottom of the page. I'm not really sure. I haven't done it myself.